Some people enter Northridge Research Institute through front doors, with PhDs hanging from their belts. Others arrive with government clearances and million-dollar grants tucked into leather briefcases. And then there was Sam Reeves, who entered, each night through the service corridor, with nothing but a key card, a mop, and a mind that noticed patterns where others saw only chaos. The world-class researchers never looked at Sam. They looked through him, around him, past him, as if the grey uniform rendered him invisible. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. But Sam noticed them. Sam noticed everything. Which is why, on a cold Thursday night in October, when he scribbled a simple observation on the back of a cleaning checklist and left it beside a molecular model, he had no idea he was about to crack open a scientific mystery that had remained unsolved for over 50 years. The clock on the wall of the Northridge Research Institute read 11:42 p.m. when Sam Reeves pushed his cleaning cart through the silent corridors of the West Wing. Unlike the daytime hours when these hallways bustled with scientists and their urgent conversations, night brought a different kind of life to the building. The hum of equipment never fully powered down. The gentle glow of emergency lights cast long shadows across gleaming floors. And in this parallel universe of night, Sam moved like a ghost among machines worth more than he would earn in 20 lifetimes. At 43, Sam had been cleaning these laboratories for nearly 7 years. His life hadn't always been destined for midnight shifts and minimum wage. Once, he'd been 3 semesters into a chemistry degree at State University before his mother's cancer diagnosis had pulled him home. The medical bills had emptied their modest savings, and education had become a luxury they couldn't afford. The years that followed blurred together, caring for his mother until she passed, taking whatever work he could find, and eventually landing at Northridge because the night shift paid slightly better and offered health insurance. "Evening, Frank," Sam called to the security guard, who sat monitoring the wall of screens near the main entrance. Frank, a retired police officer with silver hair and permanent smile lines, glanced up from his crossword puzzle. "Right on time as always, Sam. Building C needs extra attention tonight, some kind of spill in the main laboratory." Sam nodded, already adjusting his route mentally. "Anyone still around?" Dr. Collins was working late, but she left about 20 minutes ago, looked frustrated as hell, slammed her access card on the scanner hard enough I thought she might break it. Sam wasn't surprised. Dr. Sarah Collins had been working increasingly long hours over the past few months. She was different from most of the other scientists. She actually acknowledged his existence, occasionally offering a tired smile or a genuine thank you when he emptied her overflowing office trash. Sam had even caught her apologizing once, when her coffee had spilled across a freshly mopped floor. "The Harrington project still giving her trouble?" Sam asked, knowing Frank took pride in knowing the comings and goings of Northridge's research projects, even if he didn't understand the science behind them. Frank folded his newspaper and leaned forward conspirationally. "From what I overheard, today was supposed to be some kind of breakthrough. Guess it didn't work out." Sam felt a twinge of sympathy. The Harrington Project was named after Dr. Thomas Harrington, the founder of the institute, who had theorized the existence of a particular molecular structure back in 1973, a structure that could revolutionize energy storage if it could be synthesized. For 50 years, generations of scientists had tried and failed to create it. Dr. Collins had been the latest in a long line of brilliant minds to throw themselves at the challenge. "Well, better get to that spill before it sets," Sam said, guiding his cart toward Building C. The vast laboratory complex housed some of the most advanced equipment in the country. Sam had memorized every inch of it, which floors could handle heavy-duty cleaner, which delicate instruments needed special cloths, which researchers preferred their desks left untouched even when buried under papers. Tonight, he moved with practiced efficiency, starting with the common areas before moving to the specialized labs. When he reached Lab 6, the molecular synthesis lab where Dr. Collins mainly worked, he immediately saw the source of Frank's concern. A dark blue liquid had splashed across one of the workstations, with droplets trailing to the sink. Not dangerous according to the Institute's color coding system, but definitely a mess. Sam mixed the appropriate cleaning solution and set to work, carefully wiping around the expensive equipment. As he cleaned, his eyes were drawn to the molecular modeling screen that had been left on. Energy conservation was usually a priority at Northridge, but in their frustration, someone had forgotten to power down the system. The screen displayed a rotating three-dimensional model of what Sam recognized as the Harrington molecule. He'd seen it countless times on posters and displays throughout the Institute. Something about the model caught Sam's attention. Unlike previous versions he'd glimpsed, this one had a different configuration in one section. He paused, cleaning cloth, suspended mid-wipe. During his brief time in college, organic chemistry had been his strongest subject. He had possessed a natural ability to visualize molecular structures and predict how they might behave, a talent his professors had once praised before life intervened. Sam set down his cloth and stepped closer to the screen. The model rotated, slowly revealing all angles of the attempted structure. The problem was subtle, but to Sam's eye, obvious. The researchers had been trying to force stability by adding a particular bond configuration, but it created tension that would inevitably cause the structure to collapse during synthesis. "They're approaching it backward," Sam murmured to the empty lab. For a moment, he considered simply returning to his cleaning. After all, who was he to question scientists with decades of education and experience? But something about the failed experiment, the frustration evident in the spilled materials and abandoned workstation, made him hesitate. Dr. Collins had always been kind to him. Maybe she would appreciate an outside perspective, even if she ultimately dismissed it. Before he could reconsider, Sam pulled the small notepad he used for his cleaning checklists from his pocket. On the back of the day's list, he sketched the molecular structure as he saw it on the screen, then added his proposed modification, a simple rearrangement of how the carbon chain connected to the central metal complex. He included a brief note. "What if you stabilize from the inside out instead of outside in?" He hesitated, pen hovering over the paper. Should he sign it? Would Dr. Collins even take it seriously if she knew it came from the night janitor? After a moment's consideration, he simply wrote just a thought at the bottom and placed the note beside the keyboard. It was presumptuous, perhaps even foolish. But as he finished cleaning the spill and continued his rounds through the rest of the building, Sam felt a small spark of satisfaction. Even if his note ended up in the trash, for a brief moment, he had reconnected with the person he might have become, the scientist instead of the janitor. The next evening, Sam arrived for his shift to find the Institute buzzing with unusual activity despite the late hour. As he collected his cart from the storage closet, he noticed lights still on in several laboratories, and voices echoed down corridors that would normally be silent. "What's going on?" he asked Frank, who appeared more alert than usual at his security station. Frank looked up with raised eyebrows. "You didn't hear? They're saying someone had a breakthrough on the Harrington project. Dr. Collins came in early this morning looking like she hadn't slept, started working on something, and then, around noon, there was some kind of commotion. The director himself came running down from the executive floor. Sam's heart rate quickened. A breakthrough? Did it work? Don't know the details, Frank said, but word is they finally managed to create a stable version of that molecule they've been chasing. Dr. Wilson's team from the East Wing got called in, and they've been verifying results all day. Sam nodded, non-committally, trying to maintain a neutral expression while his mind raced. Could it be, had his suggestion actually helped? No, that would be too coincidental, too unlikely. Dr. Collins was brilliant. She had probably figured it out on her own after a night of reflection. Guess I'll work around them, Sam said casually, guiding his cart toward Building C. He had just begun cleaning the break room when the door swung open. Dr. Sarah Collins stood in the doorway, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Dark, circles beneath her eyes, contrasting with the unmistakable excitement in her expression. She wore the same clothes as yesterday, now creased from what had clearly been a very long work session. Sam, she said, and he froze, surprised to be addressed by name. I've been waiting for you to arrive. He set down his mop carefully. Is something wrong, Dr. Collins? Did I miss something yesterday? She approached him with purposeful strides, holding up a familiar piece of paper between two fingers, his cleaning checklist with his note and sketch on the back. Did you leave this in Lab 6 last night? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Her voice wasn't accusatory, but intense with controlled energy. Sam straightened his shoulders, preparing for reprimand. Yes, I'm sorry if I overstepped. I noticed the model on the screen and just thought, you just thought you'd solve in one night what dozens of researchers haven't been able to crack for 5 decades. There was something in her tone he couldn't quite identify. Not anger, perhaps disbelief. No, ma'am, not solve, just suggest. I used to study chemistry before. He gestured vaguely to his uniform, to the cleaning cart. I should have minded my own business. Dr. Collins stared at him for a long moment, then exhaled sharply. Sam, your suggestion worked. The words hung in the air between them. Sam blinked, certain he'd misheard. What? Your approach, stabilizing from the inside out. It worked. We've been so focused on controlling the outer electron shell that we missed what was happening at the core. I came in this morning and tried your configuration, adjusted some parameters, and we achieved stability. We've been running validation, tests all day, but it's real. She held up the paper again. This solved a 50-year-old problem. Sam felt lightheaded suddenly, bracing himself against his mop handle. That's good. I'm glad I could help. Help? Dr. Collins laughed, a sound of genuine surprise. Sam, you did more than help. You made an intuitive leap that none of us saw. I've spent 6 years on this project, and you identified the solution while cleaning around it. Before Sam could respond, the break room door opened again. Dr. Robert Wilson entered, followed closely by the Institute's director, Dr. Thomas Blackwell. Both men paused when they saw Sam, their expressions shifting from excitement to confusion. Sarah, we've confirmed the 4th test run. It's maintaining stability even under pressure variation, Dr. Wilson said, his eyes darting between her and Sam. Is there a problem here? Dr. Collins turned to her colleagues, still holding Sam's note. No problem at all. Gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Sam Reeves. He's the one who proposed the stabilization method we use today. Dr. Wilson's eyebrows shot up toward his receding hairline. The janitor? The word carried unmistakable disbelief, almost disdain. Yes, Robert, the janitor, Dr. Collins replied evenly. The janitor who spotted what an entire department of PhDs missed. Dr. Blackwell, a tall man with a commanding presence despite his 70 years, stepped forward. Unlike Wilson, his expression showed curiosity rather than dismissal. May I? See the note, Sarah? She handed him the paper, which he studied carefully, eyes moving between the molecular sketch and the brief suggestion written below it. After a moment, he looked up at Sam. "Mr. Reeves, what is your background in chemistry?" Sam swallowed hard. 3 semesters at State University, sir. I had to drop out. And yet, you recognized a solution to the Harrington configuration. It wasn't a question, but a statement tinged with wonder. I just looked at it differently, I guess. When you clean the same labs every night, you start to notice patterns. Sam shifted uncomfortably under the scrutiny of 3 senior scientists. The models I've seen always tried to build stability from the outside, but sometimes nature works from the core outward. Dr. Blackwell nodded slowly. A fresh perspective. Precisely what we've been lacking. He turned to Dr. Collins. Zara, I believe we need to have a longer conversation with Mr. Reeves. Would you be willing to delay your shift tonight? This last question directed at Sam. Yes, of course. Sam glanced at his cleaning cart, suddenly absurdly out of place in this conversation about molecular breakthroughs. Excellent. Let's continue this in my office, Dr. Blackwell said. Robert, would you inform the team we'll reconvene in an hour? Dr. Wilson hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with this turn of events. Thomas, we should focus on documenting the discovery properly. The implications for the grant renewals alone will be addressed. Dr. Blackwell cut him off firmly. But first, I want to understand exactly how Mr. Reeves saw what we didn't. He gestured toward the door. Shall we? As Sam followed Dr. Collins and the director out of the break room, he cast one last glance at his abandoned cleaning cart. For 7 years, he had moved through these corridors like a shadow, present but unseen, necessary but unacknowledged. Now, suddenly, 3 of the Institute's most important figures were treating him like a colleague rather than part of the building's maintenance system. Dr. Blackwell's office occupied the corner of the top floor with floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the sprawling research campus. Sam had cleaned this room hundreds of times, but had never before been invited to sit in one of the leather chairs across from the massive oak desk. The framed photographs on the walls chronicled the Institute's history, including several of a younger Dr. Blackwell standing alongside Thomas Harrington himself. Mr. Reeves, Dr. Blackwell began, settling into his chair. I hope you understand the significance of what's happened. The Harrington molecule isn't just another research project. It's been the holy grail of our institute since its founding. If your modification proves as stable as our initial tests indicate, we're looking at a revolutionary advancement in energy storage technology. Sam nodded, still struggling to process that his midnight observation had somehow led to this moment. I understand it's important. I've heard researchers talking about it for years. And in all those years of listening and observing, what made you decide to leave a note last night? Dr. Collins asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. Sam considered the question. I saw the spilled materials. How frustrated someone must have been, and the model looked almost right, but forcing something that didn't want to be forced. He paused, searching for words. Sometimes when I'm cleaning a tough stain, pushing harder just spreads the mess. You have to work with the material, not against it. Dr. Blackwell exchanged a glance with Dr. Collins, something unspoken passing between them. A remarkably apt analogy, he said quietly. I have a question, Dr. Collins interjected. Your note showed considerable understanding of molecular chemistry. Why are you working as a janitor instead of finishing your degree? Sam felt the familiar tightness in his chest whenever he had to explain his interrupted path. My mother got sick, cancer. I was her only family, so I came home to care for her. By the time she passed, the medical bills had taken everything. I started working nights, thinking it would be temporary until I could save enough to go back. He shrugged slightly. 7 years later, here we are. The office fell silent for a moment. Then Dr. Blackwell leaned forward, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Mr. Reeves, I believe we have an opportunity here, not just for the Institute, but for you as well." "Sir?" "The Harrington project has just entered its most critical phase. We've achieved initial synthesis, but there are months of testing, refinement, and application development ahead. We need minds that can see problems differently." He paused. "I'd like to offer you a position on the research team." Sam stared at him in disbelief. "As what? I don't have a degree. I don't have the qualifications." "As a research associate initially, you've demonstrated an intuitive understanding that frankly outweighs some of our most qualified researchers. And contributions. We can arrange for you to complete your formal education concurrently." Dr. Blackwell smiled slightly. "The Institute has an educational fund precisely for developing promising talent. But I'm the janitor," Sam said, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears. Dr. Collins leaned forward. "And I was a community college dropout before Dr. Blackwell found me working at a hardware store, mixing paint and explaining molecular pigment behavior to customers." She smiled. "Sometimes talent shows up in unexpected places. The question is, what do we do when we find it?" Sam's mind raced. Could this really be happening? After 7 years of invisible work, of watching his dreams collect dust alongside the research he cleaned around, was this moment real? What about Dr. Wilson? He didn't seem thrilled about this. Sam gestured vaguely between himself and the scientists. Dr. Blackwell waved a dismissive hand. "Robert will adapt. Scientific progress has never been about preserving hierarchies. It's about pursuing truth, regardless of its source." "I'd need time to think," Sam said finally. "Of course." Dr. Blackwell nodded. "Though I hope you'll consider this. That note you left wasn't just an observation. It was you reaching back toward the path you were meant to follow before life intervened." Dr. Collins stood. "We should let Mr. Reeves finish his shift and process this. It's a lot to take in." "Indeed." Dr. Blackwell rose as well, extending his hand across the desk. "Whatever you decide, Mr. Reeves, you've already made an indelible contribution to this institute's history." As Sam shook the director's hand, he felt the calluses formed from years of gripping mop handles and scrubbing brushes. Hands that had cleaned around discovery for so long, never expecting to participate in it. "Thank you for the opportunity," he said, finding his voice at last. "I'll give you my answer tomorrow." The walk back to his cleaning cart felt surreal. The corridors looked the same floors he had polished countless times, the same walls he knew every scuff mark on. Yet everything had changed. As he grasped the handle of his mop, he noticed a researcher passing by actually look at him, really see him, perhaps for the first time. Word traveled fast in research institutions, even at night. Sam resumed his cleaning routine, moving through the familiar motions while his mind spun with possibilities. Could he really cross the invisible line from maintenance staff to researcher? Would the others accept him or see him as an interloper? And most pressing, was he brave enough to reach for this second chance? As midnight approached, he found himself back in Lab 6, standing before the molecular modeling screen that had started it all. The display had changed. Now it showed his configuration, refined and elaborated by Dr. Collins's team throughout the day. Beside the screen sat a small sign that hadn't been there yesterday. Harrington Collins Stabilization Model, First Successful Synthesis, October 14th, 2023. There was no mention of the night janitor who had scribbled a suggestion on the back of a cleaning checklist. Not yet, anyway. Sam smiled to himself as he carefully wiped down the countertops around the workstation. Tomorrow would bring decisions and changes, challenges and opportunities. But tonight, for the first time in 7 years, he allowed himself To imagine a future where he entered Northridge Research Institute, not through the service entrance, but through the front doors. Not with a mop and key card, but with purpose and recognition. As he turned off the lights in Lab 6, completing his cleaning duties one last time, Sam paused in the doorway. The soft emergency lights cast his shadow long across the laboratory floor, no longer invisible, no longer unseen. The morning after his meeting with Dr. Blackwell and Dr. Collins, Sam Reeves sat at his small kitchen table, staring at two items laid side by side: his worn Northridge janitor's uniform and a brand new employee badge with Research Associate printed below his name. The sun filtered through the dusty blinds of his one-bedroom apartment in East Riverside, illuminating the peeling linoleum and water stains on the ceiling, daily reminders of the limited life he had accepted years ago. Sam ran his fingers across the glossy new badge, still unable to fully comprehend the transformation that had occurred in less than 24 hours. When he had returned to Dr. Blackwell's office that morning, intending to ask for time to consider the offer, he had instead found himself saying yes before he could reconsider. The director had immediately whisked him to Human Resources, where bewildered administrators had processed his transfer from facilities management to the research division. "We'll need to get you proper credentials," Dr. Blackwell had said, watching as Sam's janitor's badge was replaced with the new one that now lay on his kitchen table. "And of course, the salary adjustment will take effect immediately." The number they had shown him still seemed impossible, more than triple what he earned as a janitor, enough to move out of this crumbling apartment complex, enough to perhaps finally finish his degree, enough to breathe. A sharp knock at his door pulled Sam from his reverie. He wasn't expecting anyone. Few people ever visited him here, especially not at 9 in the morning when he would normally be sleeping after his night shift. He crossed the small living space and peered through the peephole, surprised to see Dr. Collins standing in the dingy hallway of his apartment building, looking decidedly out of place in her sleek black blazer. "Dr. Collins?" Sam opened the door, suddenly self-conscious about the shabby surroundings. "Is something wrong?" She offered a tight smile. "Nothing's wrong. May I come in? There are some things we should discuss before you start tomorrow." "Of course." Sam stepped aside, quickly scanning the apartment for embarrassing items. He hadn't expected company, much less company like Dr. Collins. "Sorry about the mess. I usually sleep during the day." "No apologies necessary." She entered, politely pretending not to notice the sagging couch or the stack of past-due bills on the counter. Her eyes instead fell on the two badges on the kitchen table. "Ah, I see you've received your new credentials." Sam nodded, gesturing for her to take the lone chair while he perched on the edge of the couch. "It still doesn't feel real. That's partly why I'm here." Dr. Collins sat, her posture perfect even on the uncomfortable metal chair. "I wanted to prepare you for what you're walking into." "You mean the lab?" "I mean the politics." Her expression grew serious. "What happened yesterday? Your note, the breakthrough. It's causing quite a stir at the Institute. Not everyone is as enthusiastic as Thomas and I about your involvement." Sam felt a knot form in his stomach. "Dr. Wilson, Robert is just the most vocal opponent. There are others who feel that." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "That acknowledging your contribution undermines the years of formal research that preceded it. So they want to pretend the janitor had nothing to do with it." It wasn't a question. Dr. Collins sighed. "Some do, yes. Science can be as hierarchical as any medieval court, Sam. People spend decades building their reputations, accumulating credentials, securing grants. Then someone like you comes along, someone who sees what they missed, and it threatens the very foundation of that hierarchy." Sam leaned back, feeling the familiar weight of invisibility settling over him again. "So why did you and Dr. Blackwell offer me the position?" Wouldn't it be easier to just use my idea and keep me mopping floors? Easier, perhaps. She met his eyes directly. But Thomas Blackwell built this institute to advance science, not careers. And She hesitated. I believe talent deserves recognition, regardless of its source. Besides, your insight wasn't just luck. The way you reconstructed that model showed genuine intuition. We'd be fools not to cultivate that. But you're fighting an uphill battle. We are, she acknowledged. Which brings me to the second reason for my visit. Starting tomorrow, you're going to face resistance, skepticism, perhaps even outright hostility. I need to know if you're prepared for that. Sam stood and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot below, where his 15-year-old sedan sat beside Dr. Collins' sleek hybrid. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. My whole life has been an uphill battle, Dr. Collins. When my mum got sick, we fought insurance companies, hospital bureaucracies, specialists who wouldn't return our calls because we didn't have the right connections. After she died, I fought debt collectors and landlords and the crushing weight of a system designed to keep people like me exactly where we are. He turned back to face her. I've been invisible at Northridge for 7 years. I can handle people seeing me and not liking what they see. Something shifted in Dr. Collins' expression. Respect, perhaps, or recognition. Call me Sarah, she said simply. If we're going to be colleagues, we should use first names. Sarah. Sam tested the word, still strange on his tongue. Can I ask you something? She nodded. You said Dr. Blackwell found you working at a hardware store. How did you cross that line? How did you go from mixing paint to... He gestured vaguely, encompassing her obvious success. Sarah's usually composed, features softened. I was 24, community college dropout working at Hartman's Hardware. One day, this distinguished older man came in, needing specialized paint for a demonstration model. I started explaining how certain pigments change molecular structure under different light conditions. Turns out, he was giving a lecture on photosensitive materials at the university that afternoon. She smiled at the memory. He said I knew more about practical applications than most of his graduate students. Offered to mentor me if I was willing to work twice as hard to catch up. Dr. Blackwell. Thomas has a habit of finding diamonds in unexpected places, she confirmed. He sponsored my bachelor's degree, then my doctorate, but it wasn't easy. I heard the whispers, felt the stares. The paint mixer who thought she belonged in a research lab. Her eyes hardened slightly. 15 years and 3 major breakthroughs later, they still sometimes introduce me as Thomas Blackwell's project. Sam absorbed this information, seeing Dr. Collins, Sarah, in a new light. So you're paying it forward? I'm recognizing. Talent when I see it, she corrected, just as Thomas did with me. She glanced at her watch and stood. I should go. I have a meeting with the patent attorneys in an hour, but there's one more thing. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick textbook. You might want to refresh your knowledge of advanced molecular chemistry. The team will expect you to contribute from day one. Sam took the book, running his hand over the cover. Thank you for everything. Sarah paused at the door. Don't thank me yet. The hard part starts tomorrow. 9 a.m. Lab 6. With a final nod, she departed, leaving Sam alone with his 2 badges and a textbook that represented the bridge between his past and a future he was still struggling to believe in. That night, Sam didn't sleep. He sat at his kitchen table until sunrise, absorbing as much of the textbook as his rusty academic skills would allow. The foundational knowledge from his 3 semesters of college was still there, but buried under years of disuse. Periodically, he would look up at his janitor's uniform hanging on the back of the door, a reminder of the life he was leaving behind and the leap he was about to take. At 8:30 a.m., Sam stood outside the main entrance of Northridge Research Institute, dressed in the best clothes he owned, khaki pants and a button-down shirt he'd purchased for job interviews years ago. His hands were clean, but still bore the calluses and stubborn stains of his years of manual labor. He clutched his new ID badge, hesitating before the automatic doors that had never before been his entry point to the building. As he finally stepped forward, the doors slid open with the same soft hiss they made for PhDs and executives. Inside, the security guard at the main desk, not Frank from the night shift, but a younger woman Sam had never met, glanced up expectantly. "ID, please?" she asked with the polite detachment of someone who processed dozens of researchers every morning. Sam handed over his new badge, half expecting her to laugh or call security. Instead, she scanned it casually and handed it back. "Research Division, Building C, elevators are to your right." Just like that, he was in. No questions, no suspicion. The badge had transformed him from invisible to legitimate with a single swipe. As Sam walked toward the elevators, he passed researchers who would have previously looked through him, who might have even stepped around his cleaning equipment without acknowledgement. Now they nodded politely or simply ignored him as another, unremarkable colleague. The elevator to the research floors required an additional badge swipe. When the doors opened on the third floor, Sam stepped into a world he had only ever seen in its after-hours state, bustling with activity, filled with voices discussing concepts that stretched the boundaries of his understanding. Lab 6, usually silent and shadowy during his cleaning shifts, was now alive with purpose. Researchers in white coats moved between workstations. Computer screens displayed complex molecular models, including variations of the Harrington molecule. At the center of it all stood Sarah Collins, directing the activity like a conductor before an orchestra. She spotted him lingering in the doorway and waved him over. "Sam, right on time. Everyone, a moment please." The bustling activity paused as a dozen faces turned toward them. Sam recognized some from his night shifts, researchers who had never before looked directly at him. For those who haven't heard, this is Sam Reeves. He'll be joining our team as a research associate, focusing on alternative stabilization approaches for the Harrington synthesis. Sarah's tone was matter-of-fact, brooking no argument. Sam brings a unique perspective that's already contributed significantly to our breakthrough. A murmur rippled through the group. Sam noticed varied reactions: curiosity, confusion, and on at least two faces, unmistakable resentment. "Dr. Wilson will be along shortly to discuss the validation protocols," Sarah continued. "In the meantime, Sam, Maya will get you set up at your workstation." She nodded toward a young woman with curly black hair and bright, intelligent eyes. As Sarah moved away to address another group, Maya approached with a friendly smile. "So, you're the janitor who solved the impossible puzzle. I'm Maya Chen, postdoc in molecular engineering." "Nice to meet you," Sam said, relieved by her open expression. "And I didn't solve it. I just suggested an approach. An approach that worked after 50 years of failure," she pointed out, leading him to a workstation in the corner. "That's going to ruffle some feathers around here, especially with certain people who've staked their careers on the problem." She gestured subtly toward a thin, stern-looking man entering the lab. Speaking of which, Dr. Robert Wilson surveyed the laboratory like a general inspecting troops, his sharp eyes eventually landing on Sam. Unlike yesterday, when surprise had dominated his expression, today his face showed only cold assessment. He made his way across the lab, researchers parting before him. "Mr. Reeves," he said, not bothering to extend his hand. "I understand you're joining our team." "Yes, sir," Sam replied, defaulting to the respectful address he had used during his years as part of the custodial staff. "I appreciate the opportunity." Wilson studied him like a specimen under glass. "Well, Opportunity certainly seems to have smiled on you. One little note, and suddenly you're a researcher. There was no mistaking the edge in his voice. I hope you understand that real science is more than lucky guesses. It requires discipline, methodical testing, years of rigorous training. Before Sam could respond, Maya spoke up. Sam's configuration wasn't a guess, Dr. Wilson. It was an elegant solution based on pattern recognition. Exactly the kind of lateral thinking we encourage in your seminars. Her smile remained pleasant, but her eyes had hardened slightly. Wilson's gaze flicked to her, then back to Sam. We'll see, won't we? The real test is replicability and application. One success doesn't make a scientist. Robert, Sarah's voice cut through the tension as she approached. Is there a problem? Not at all, Wilson replied smoothly. Just welcoming our newest colleague, as in setting appropriate expectations. With a final measuring look at Sam, he turned and walked away. Sarah watched him go, then turned to Sam. Well, that went about as expected. Better, actually, Maya added. He didn't actively suggest. Sam be drug tested to explain his insight. Despite the tension of the moment, Sam found himself smiling. Is he always like that? Only with people he perceives as threats, Sarah said matter-of-factly, which is now apparently you. Take it as a compliment. She gestured to the workstation. Maya will show you the systems. We'll reconvene at 11 to discuss the next phase of testing. As Sarah walked away, Maya leaned closer. Don't let Wilson get to you. He's been trying to solve the Harrington synthesis for 20 years. Having a former janitor succeed where he failed is challenging his worldview. Sam nodded, settling into the chair before the advanced computer setup. Thanks for the backup. Don't mention it. She pulled up a chair beside him. Now, let's get you logged in. The first thing to know about our modeling software is that it has serious processing power, but a terrible user interface. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of information as Maya patiently guided Sam through the laboratory systems. Despite his limited formal education, Sam found himself absorbing the technical details quickly, his mind making connections between what he observed during his nights of cleaning and the actual purposes of the equipment he had worked around for so long. By the time the team gathered for the 11 o'clock meeting, Sam had begun to feel less like an imposter and more like someone who might actually belong. This tentative confidence was immediately tested when he entered the conference room and felt the weight of evaluating stares from the assembled researchers. The room contained about 20 people, arranged around a large oval table. Dr. Blackwell sat at the head, with Sarah and Wilson flanking him. Sam slipped into an empty chair beside Maya, grateful for her friendly presence amid the scrutiny. Good morning, everyone, Dr. Blackwell began. As you're all aware, we've achieved a significant breakthrough in the Harrington project. For the first time in 50 years, we have a stable synthesis of the theoretical molecule my old friend Thomas predicted would revolutionize energy storage. Murmurs of excitement rippled through the room. The validation tests confirm stability under standard conditions, he continued. Now we enter the critical phase, testing performance under variable conditions and beginning to explore practical applications. He looked around the table. This is where your specialized knowledge becomes essential. Each research team will approach the molecule from their particular expertise. As Dr. Blackwell outlined the research plan, Sam listened intently, noting how the various specialties represented around the table would contribute to the next phase. Some teams would focus on stress testing the molecular stability, others on potential energy storage capacity, still others on manufacturing scalability. And finally, Dr. Blackwell concluded, we have a new research track focusing on alternative stabilization approaches. He nodded toward Sam. Mr. Reeves will be working with Dr. Collins to explore variations of the core stabilization method that led to our breakthrough. Instantly, Sam felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. Across the table, a middle-aged woman with steel-gray hair and severe glasses spoke up. Thomas, while I appreciate your enthusiasm for fresh perspectives, is it wise to dedicate resources to alternatives when we've just confirmed our primary approach works? Dr. Blackwell smiled patiently. Dr. Winters, our success with one configuration doesn't preclude the existence of others that might prove more efficient or easier to manufacture at scale. Science thrives on exploring multiple pathways. Of course, Dr. Winters replied smoothly. I simply question whether someone with Mr. Reeves's limited background has the necessary foundation to lead such exploration. Before Dr. Blackwell could respond, Wilson jumped in. I share Catherine's concerns. We have postdocs with years of specialized training who could more effectively. Robert. Dr. Blackwell's voice remained pleasant, but something in his tone silenced Wilson immediately. Mr. Reeves has demonstrated precisely the kind of intuitive understanding we need at this juncture. He'll be working under Sarah's supervision, and I have complete confidence in their approach. He looked around the table, meeting each doubtful gaze directly. This institute was founded to solve problems that conventional thinking couldn't crack. Sometimes that requires unconventional thinkers. The subtle rebuke hung in the air for a moment before Dr. Blackwell continued with his assignments. Sam kept his expression neutral, but inside, a turbulent mix of emotions swirled. Gratitude for Dr. Blackwell's support, determination to prove himself worthy of it, and a gnawing fear that the skeptics might be right about his limitations. As the meeting concluded and researchers began filtering out, Dr. Winters approached Sam directly. Unlike Wilson's open hostility, her expression showed something more complex, curiosity tinged with wariness. Mr. Reeves, she said, extending her hand. Catherine Winters, Quantum Applications. Sam shook her hand, surprised by the gesture. Nice to meet you, Dr. Winters. She studied him for a moment. Thomas Blackwell has been a brilliant scientist for longer than you've been alive. He's also an excellent judge of potential. I hope to prove him right, Sam replied carefully. That would be in everyone's best interest. Her gaze was clinical, assessing. The Harrington Project isn't just another research initiative. It's the culmination of 5 decades of work, millions in funding, and countless careers. Its success or failure will affect everyone at this institute. She paused, including those of us who have dedicated our entire professional lives to it. Sam recognized the subtle warning beneath her words. I understand the stakes, Dr. Winters. Do you? She raised an eyebrow. When you suggested your stabilization approach, did you consider the quantum fluctuations at the core? The thermal degradation possibilities under variable electromagnetic conditions, the manufacturing implications of metal catalyst requirements. Sam hesitated, suddenly aware of the vast gaps in his knowledge. No, he admitted. I saw a pattern and offered a solution based on what I observed. To his surprise, Dr. Winters nodded as if he'd passed a test. Honesty, good. That's the beginning of real science. Acknowledging what you don't know. She adjusted her glasses. Your idea worked, Mr. Reeves, which means you have something valuable to contribute, but ideas without foundation are merely lucky guesses. If you're serious about this path, you'll need to build that foundation rapidly. With that cryptic mixture of challenge and advice, she departed, leaving Sam to ponder her words as the conference room emptied around him. Sarah approached as the last of the others left. Well, you've survived your first research meeting. How does it feel? Like walking across a minefield in the dark, Sam admitted. She laughed. That's actually a fairly accurate description of cutting-edge research. Listen, Catherine Winters may seem intimidating, but her points are valid. Your intuition got us this breakthrough, but sustaining your contribution will require more. I know. I have a lot to learn. And not much time to learn it, Sarah added, which is why I've arranged something. She handed him a folder. This is your new schedule. Mornings in the lab with me, afternoons in specialized tutorials with various department heads, evenings in advanced coursework at the university. Dr. Blackwell has expedited your enrollment in their degree completion program. Sam opened the folder, staring at the packed schedule that would occupy virtually every waking hour of his life for the foreseeable future. This is intense. It's necessary, Sarah said firmly. You have natural talent, Sam, but talent without training is like a Ferrari with no fuel. Impressive to look at, but it won't take you far. She softened slightly. The good news is you don't have to do it alone. Maya has volunteered to help with your technical onboarding, and I'll be overseeing your research development personally. Why? Sam asked, the question escaping before he could reconsider it. Why are you doing all this for me? Sarah was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful. 15 years ago, I was mixing paint at a hardware store, convinced that my chance at a scientific career was gone. Then someone saw potential in me that I had stopped seeing in myself. She met his eyes directly. The greatest waste in science isn't failed experiments, Sam. It's failed opportunities, minds that could have contributed but never got the chance. I won't let that happen to you, just as Thomas didn't let it happen to me. A knock at the conference room door interrupted them. Maya stood in the doorway, her expression urgent. Sarah, you need to see this. The second phase stability test is showing anomalies. Sarah's posture immediately shifted to alert. What kind of anomalies? The kind that shouldn't be possible with our current model, Maya replied, glancing briefly at Sam. It's maintaining stability, but exhibiting properties we didn't predict. Show me. Sarah turned to Sam. Coming? Sam nodded, tucking the folder under his arm as he followed them back to the main laboratory. Whatever doubts and challenges lay ahead, he was now irrevocably part of this world, no longer the invisible observer, but a participant in discovery. The path forward would be difficult, filled with skeptics and knowledge gaps to overcome, but for the first time in 7 years, it was a path with purpose. As they hurried through the corridor, Sam caught a glimpse of his reflection in the glass doors of the laboratory, no longer in the grey uniform of a janitor, but moving with the purposeful stride of a researcher. The transformation was just beginning, but in that moment, he allowed himself to believe it might actually be possible. 3 months after Sam Reeves left behind his mop and grey uniform, the Northridge Research Institute buzzed with anticipation. The Grand Lecture Hall, normally reserved for visiting Nobel laureates and major scientific announcements, had been prepared for a special presentation on the Harrington Project. Camera crews from science documentaries and technology publications set up their equipment along the walls. Representatives from energy companies, government agencies, and academic institutions filled the rows of seats, all eager to witness what many were already calling the most significant breakthrough in energy storage of the decade. Behind the stage, Sam adjusted his tie for the 5th time. Still unaccustomed to the formal attire Dr. Blackwell had insisted the core team wear for the presentation. The Navy suit had been delivered to his new apartment the previous day. An apartment in a building with working elevators and no water stains on the ceiling, paid for with his research associate salary. Nervous? Maya appeared beside him, elegant in a tailored pantsuit, her usual lab ponytail replaced by an elaborate updo. Terrified, Sam admitted. 3 months ago, I was cleaning these floors. Now I'm about to present groundbreaking research to the scientific community. And you deserve to be here more than most, she said firmly. The alternative application pathway you developed might end up being even more significant than the original breakthrough. Sam started to respond when Sarah Collins approached, tablet in hand, her expression tense. "Change of plans," she said without preamble. "Wilson is insisting on presenting the quantum stability validation himself. Says his team's contribution needs proper representation. That means I'll be bumped to the end," Sam concluded, familiar by now with the politics. Sarah nodded. "Or possibly cut entirely if he runs long, which he will almost certainly do deliberately." "It's fine," Sam assured her, though his disappointment was evident. "The work is what matters, not who presents it." "No, it's not fine," Sarah said firmly. "This is exactly the kind of academic gatekeeping that—" She stopped as Dr. Blackwell approached, his usual calm demeanor slightly frayed around the edges. "Politics in progress, I see," he observed dryly. "Robert has made his feelings known quite forcefully." "We were just discussing the revised presentation order," Sarah replied, her frustration evident. Dr. Blackwell turned to Sam. "I apologize for the last-minute adjustments. Unfortunately, the scientific community can be as petty as any other human institution." "I understand," Sam said. "Dr. Wilson has seniority and a reputation to maintain." "Indeed." Dr. Blackwell studied him for a moment. "How are you finding your coursework at the university?" The abrupt change of subject caught Sam off guard. "Challenging, but rewarding. The professor says I could complete my bachelor's within 18 months if I maintain my current pace." "Excellent," Dr. Blackwell nodded thoughtfully. "And your alternative stabilization approach is showing promising results in the early tests." "Yes, sir. By shifting the secondary bond configuration, we've achieved a 30% reduction in catalyst requirements without sacrificing stability, which means a significantly more accessible manufacturing process," Maya added. Dr. Blackwell smiled. "Perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to hear." He looked past them as the event coordinator signaled that they were ready to begin. "It appears we're about to start. Sarah, I'll need to speak with you and Robert before we go on." As they walked away, Maya squeezed Sam's arm supportively. "Don't worry. Your contribution will be acknowledged, even if Wilson tries to minimize it." Sam nodded, but privately he wasn't so sure. Over the past 3 months, he had learned that science was as much about human dynamics as it was about data and discovery. Dr. Wilson and his supporters had grudgingly accepted Sam's presence in the lab, but they still treated him as an anomaly, a lucky amateur who had stumbled onto something valuable rather than a legitimate colleague. The lights dimmed, signaling the audience to take their seats. From his position in the wings, Sam watched as Dr. Blackwell took the stage to enthusiastic applause. The Institute's director presented an elegant overview of the Harrington Project's history, from Thomas Harrington's original theoretical prediction 50 years ago to the decades of failed attempts that followed. "And now," Dr. Blackwell concluded, "I'm pleased to introduce the team that finally achieved what many considered impossible: the stable synthesis of the Harrington molecule, with its revolutionary implications for energy storage technology." Deal. One by one, the senior researchers took the stage. Dr. Wilson expounding on quantum validation protocols, Dr. Winters explaining practical applications, and finally, Sarah Collins describing the breakthrough stabilization approach. Sam noted that she carefully credited his initial insight, though the technical audience likely had no idea that the S. Reeves in her presentation slides had been mopping floors less than 4 months ago. As the presentation neared its conclusion, Dr. Blackwell returned to the podium. Instead of offering closing remarks as expected, he said something that made Sam's breath catch. "Before we conclude, I'd like to introduce someone whose unique perspective proved instrumental to our breakthrough. Without his contribution, we might still be pursuing conventional approaches that had failed for decades. He looked toward the wings. "Samuel Reeves, would you join us, please?" Momentarily frozen with surprise, Sam felt Maya nudge him forward. On legs that suddenly felt unsteady, he walked onto the stage, blinking in the bright lights, acutely aware of hundreds of eyes tracking his movement. Dr. Blackwell shook his hand and stepped aside, giving him the podium. The microphone waited. The audience waited. Sam looked out at the sea of faces, distinguished scientists, corporate executives, academic leaders, and for a moment, the old doubt threatened to overwhelm him. Who was he to address such an audience? Then, in the front row, he spotted Dr. Collins giving him an encouraging nod, and beside her, to his surprise, Frank the night security guard, out of uniform and beaming with pride. The familiar face of his former colleague centered him, a reminder of the journey that had brought him here. "Good afternoon," Sam began, his voice steadier than he expected. 3 months ago, I was working the night shift as a janitor here. At Northridge, my job was to clean around the brilliance, not contribute to it. A murmur rippled through the audience. But sometimes the most valuable insights come from unexpected sources. When I left a note suggesting an alternative approach to the Harrington stabilization, I wasn't trying to solve a 50-year-old mystery. I was simply observing a pattern that became visible after years of cleaning the same labs, seeing the same failed approaches night after night. Sam brought up the molecular visualization on the large screen behind him. What I noticed was that conventional approaches were trying to force stability from the outside in, when the molecule's nature seemed to suggest an inside-out approach. He demonstrated with the digital model, showing how his configuration allowed the structure to support itself rather than requiring external stabilization. This initial insight led to our breakthrough, but it was just the beginning. Over the past 3 months, our team has developed this further, exploring alternative stabilization pathways that could make manufacturing more accessible and cost-effective. As he outlined the advanced research he'd contributed to since joining the team, Sam was conscious of Dr. Wilson's rigid posture at the edge of the stage, of Dr. Winter's evaluating gaze, and, most encouragingly, of Dr. Blackwell's satisfied expression. "The lesson here isn't just about molecular chemistry," Sam concluded. "It's about perspective. Scientific advancement thrives when we welcome diverse viewpoints, regardless of their source. A janitor's observation, combined with the brilliant expertise of this research team, solved a puzzle that had confounded conventional approaches for half a century. Imagine what other breakthroughs await when we open science to more voices and more perspectives." The applause that followed surprised him with its warmth and duration. As he stepped away from the podium, Dr. Blackwell approached him with an outstretched hand. "Well said, Sam," he murmured, "precisely what this community needed to hear." The remainder of the presentation passed in a blur. When it concluded, the stage was flooded with journalists and representatives eager to ask questions. Sam found himself surrounded, fielding inquiries about his background, his perspective, and his unlikely path to scientific contribution. "Is it true you had to drop out of college due to financial hardship?" one reporter asked. "Yes," Sam replied. "Life circumstances interrupted my education, but not my curiosity or my capacity to learn." "What would you say to other janitors, service workers, and people without formal credentials who might have valuable insights to contribute?" asked another. Sam considered this carefully. "I'd say your perspective has value, especially when it differs from the established view. And I'd say to the institutions, talent doesn't always come with the expected credentials. Sometimes it's cleaning your floors or delivering your mail or answering your phones. The question is whether you're willing to see it." As the crowd gradually dispersed for the reception that followed, Sam found himself approached by a woman he didn't recognize. Elegant, silver-haired, with keen eyes that evaluated him carefully. "Mr. Reeves," she said, extending her hand. "Elena Harrington." Sam's eyes widened as he shook her hand, as in, "Thomas Harrington was my father," she confirmed. "I've followed the Institute's work on his molecule for decades. I was beginning to think I wouldn't live to see it. Realized, it's an honor to meet you, Ms. Harrington." She studied him with undisguised curiosity. When Thomas founded this institute, he insisted on an unusual motto: truth before tradition. Do you know why? Sam shook his head. He believed scientific progress was often hindered not by lack of data or technology, but by institutional resistance to unconventional thinking. Her eyes crinkled slightly. "He would have appreciated your story enormously." "That means a great deal, coming from you. I'd like to discuss something with you, if you have a moment." She gestured toward a quieter corner of the reception hall. "The Harrington Foundation oversees several initiatives my father established. One of them is a fellowship program specifically designed for non-traditional paths to scientific contribution." Sam followed her, intrigued. "We fund people with demonstrable talent but interrupted education, single parents returning to science after raising children, veterans transitioning from military service, and yes, maintenance staff and service workers whose observational skills reveal scientific insight." She handed him a business card. "We're always looking for advisors who understand both the challenges and the potential of such unconventional paths." Before Sam could respond, Dr. Wilson approached, his expression carefully neutral, but his posture stiff with barely contained displeasure. "Ms. Harrington," he greeted her with forced cordiality, "I hope you found our presentation illuminating. If you have any technical questions about the quantum validation protocols, I'd be happy to elaborate." "Thank you, Dr. Wilson," she replied coolly. "Actually, Mr. Reeves was just explaining his perspective on alternative stabilization approaches, quite reminiscent of my father's thinking, in fact." Wilson's smile tightened. While Mr. Reeves's initial observation was certainly fortuitous, the rigorous scientific validation was the product of decades of methodical research by trained professionals. "Of course," Elena Harrington agreed pleasantly. "Just as my father's original insight came not in a laboratory, but while watching leaves fall in our garden. He often said the universe whispers its secrets in unexpected moments to those paying attention." She turned back to Sam. "Think about my offer, Mr. Reeves. The Foundation could benefit from your unique journey." As she walked away, Wilson's composed facade cracked slightly. Advisor to the Harrington Foundation, quite a leap from pushing a mop. "Dr. Wilson," Sam said carefully, "I know my presence here challenges certain assumptions about credentials and pathways to contribution. But the molecule works, the science is sound. Isn't that what ultimately matters?" For a moment, something unreadable flickered across Wilson's features. Perhaps recognition, perhaps simply resignation. "The science is indeed sound," he acknowledged. "Finally, your configuration was elegantly conceived." Coming from Wilson, this grudging admission was equivalent to effusive praise. Sam nodded, accepting the olive branch for what it was. "Thank you. And your quantum validation framework was crucial. We wouldn't have confirmed stability without it." A hint of surprise crossed Wilson's face at this acknowledgement. With a curt nod, he moved away, leaving Sam to navigate the remaining reception conversations with a growing sense of belonging that, while still tentative, felt more substantial than it had 3 months ago. Later that evening, as the event wound down, Sam found himself standing alone on the Institute's rooftop terrace, taking a moment of quiet after hours of intense social interaction. The city lights stretched before him, a constellation of human activity against the darkening sky. "There you are," Sarah's voice came from behind him. "Hiding from your new admirers?" Sam smiled as she joined him at the railing. "Just taking a breather. It's been an overwhelming day." "You handled it beautifully." She leaned against the railing beside him. Elena Harrington was impressed. That's not easy to achieve. "She offered me an advisory position with the foundation." Sarah raised her eyebrows. "Already? That's remarkably fast, even for someone with your demonstrated talent." "I think she liked the symbolism, the janitor who helped realize her father's vision." "It's more than symbolism, Sam. You've earned this recognition." She studied him for a moment. "Are you going to accept?" Sam looked out over the city again. "I'd like to complete my degree first, and there's still so much work to do on the alternative pathways we're developing." "Always the scientist now," she teased gently, methodical, focused on the work. "I learned from the best," he replied, glancing at her. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken eventually by Sarah. "You know, when Thomas first hired me away from the hardware store, he told me something I've never forgotten. He said, the most important scientific instrument isn't in any laboratory. It's the human capacity to see patterns others miss. And I think he would have recognized that quality in you immediately. I wish I could have met him. He would have enjoyed your journey." Sarah straightened up. "Speaking of journeys, there's something I need to show you before you leave tonight." Curious, Sam followed her back inside and through the now quiet corridors of the Institute. They took the elevator to the main lobby, where Sarah led him to the wall that displayed the Institute's most significant achievements. A chronological showcase of breakthroughs that had emerged from Northridge over its 50-year history. At tomb, the end of the row, a new installation had been added. Behind glass was a simple cleaning checklist with a molecular diagram sketched on the back. Sam's original note, preserved alongside a digital display showing the successful Harrington molecule, rotating slowly in 3 dimensions. The plaque beneath it read, "Harrington molecule, first successful synthesis, 2023. Initial stabilization approach proposed by Samuel Reeves, demonstrating that scientific insight knows no hierarchical boundaries." Sam stared at the display, momentarily speechless. "Thomas had this planned before today's presentation," Sarah explained. "He believes your contribution should be permanently recognized, not just for the scientific achievement, but for what it represents about the nature of discovery itself." "I don't know what to say," Sam managed finally. "You don't need to say anything. Just keep doing what you've started." She smiled. "The janitor who solved a 50-year-old mystery isn't the end of your story, Sam. It's just the beginning." As they stood before the display, Frank the security guard approached, back in his uniform for the night shift, but beaming with pride. "There he is." Frank clapped Sam on the shoulder. "Man of the hour. I knew something was different about you. Sam, all those nights you stayed after your shift, looking at those science books in the break room. Now look at you, solving the big puzzle everyone else missed." Sam grinned, genuinely touched by his former colleague's enthusiasm. "Thanks for coming today, Frank. It meant a lot to see a friendly face out there." "Wouldn't have missed it," Frank replied. "The other janitors aren't going to believe this." "Well, actually they will. We've been taking bets on which one of us would make the breakthrough ever since you got promoted." He laughed heartily at his own joke. As Frank continued his rounds, Sarah checked her watch. "I should go. Early meeting tomorrow with the patent attorneys." "Of course," Sam nodded, "and thank you for everything." After Sarah departed, Sam lingered before the display, still processing the reality of seeing his hasty note enshrined. Among the Institute's historic achievements, the building was quiet now, the reception guests and documentary crews long gone. In this moment of solitude, he allowed himself to fully feel the magnitude of the journey, from invisible night shift worker to recognized contributor. He reached out, touching the glass that protected his note, remembering the moment he had written it, uncertain, yet compelled by an insight he couldn't ignore. He thought of all the other insights that might be lost, because the people who had them didn't have the right credentials, the right background, the right opportunity to be heard. A noise from the corridor interrupted his reflection, the familiar squeak of wheels that could only be a cleaning cart. Sam turned to see a young woman in the grey uniform he had worn for 7 years, pushing the same model of cart he had navigated through these halls countless nights. She slowed when she saw him, recognition dawning in her eyes. "You're him," she said softly. "The janitor from the presentation today, the one who figured out the molecule." "Sam Reeves," he confirmed, extending his hand. "Lucia Mendez," she replied, shaking it tentatively. "I took over your old shift in Building C. How's the third-floor supply closet? Still sticking in humid weather?" She laughed, surprised. "Yes, I have to shoulder it open every time it rains." Sam smiled. "Some things never change." Lucia glanced at the display behind him, then back at his face. "Is it really true? You left a note on a cleaning checklist and solved something they'd been working on for 50 years. "I noticed a pattern," Sam said simply. "After cleaning the same labs night after night, seeing the same failed approaches on the screens. Sometimes a fresh perspective is all it takes." Lucia hesitated, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small notebook. "I've been watching how they set up the cell cultures in the biology wing. There's something about the growth patterns when they change the temperature." She stopped abruptly, embarrassed. "Sorry, you probably don't want to hear this." Sam's expression grew. "Serious?" "Actually, I do. Tell me what you've noticed, Lucia." As she began describing her observations, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence, Sam listened with complete attention. He recognized in her the same curiosity, the same capacity for pattern recognition that had changed his own path. "Have you shown this to anyone?" he asked when she finished. She shook her head. "Who would listen to the night janitor?" Sam smiled, gesturing to the display behind him. "Things are changing around here, and I know someone who would definitely want to hear about this." He pulled out his phone. "Do you have time to meet with Dr. Collins tomorrow? I think your observations about the cell cultures might be significant." The hope that bloomed on Lucia's face was achingly familiar. The same hope that had awakened in him when Professor Wren had first taken his midnight observation seriously. As they exchanged contact information and made plans to meet with Sarah the following day, Sam felt a circle completing, a new connection forming in the ongoing chain of discovery. Later that night, as Sam finally left the institute, he paused in the parking lot, looking up at the building where he had spent so many hours in invisible service. The cleaning crews would continue their rounds through the quiet corridors, just as they always had. But perhaps now, some of them might leave. Notes of their own might dare to believe their observations mattered. And perhaps, someday, people would stop being surprised when groundbreaking insights came from unexpected sources, when the janitor or the delivery person or the cafeteria worker noticed what the experts had missed. Perhaps, eventually, society would learn to recognize that brilliance didn't always arrive with the expected credentials, that insights could emerge from any mind that paid attention to the patterns of the world. Until then, Sam would continue his work, completing his degree, developing alternative pathways for the Harrington molecule, and now ensuring that Lucia's observations received the same consideration his had. The 50-year mystery had been solved, but the greater challenge remained. opening the doors of scientific discovery to every perspective, regardless of title or background. As he drove away from Northridge, Sam smiled at the thought of what tomorrow might bring. Another unexpected insight, another overlooked pattern, another mystery waiting for the person who saw the world a little differently. 5 years after Sam Reeves left a scribbled note that changed the trajectory of energy storage technology, he stood at the podium of Stockholm's concert hall, adjusting his bow tie nervously. The elegant blue and gold hall was filled with the world's scientific elite, gathered for the Nobel Prize ceremony. Behind him sat the Northridge team, Dr. Sarah Collins, Dr. Thomas Blackwell, and even Dr. Robert Wilson, whose initial skepticism had gradually transformed into grudging respect, and eventually genuine collaboration. The Nobel Prize in Chemistry, announced the presenter, is awarded to Dr. Sarah Collins and Samuel Reeves for their revolutionary work on stabilization pathways for complex molecular structures, with particular recognition for the Harrington-Collins-Reeves energy storage application that has transformed renewable energy viability worldwide. The applause thundered through the hall as Sam and Sarah rose to accept the award. Sam's mind flashed briefly to the janitor's closet in Building C, where he had once stored his mop and cleaning supplies. The journey from there to here seemed impossible, yet here he stood. As they returned to their seats, medals gleaming against formal attire, Sam glanced at the empty chair beside him, reserved for Lucia Mendez, whose flight from Boston had been delayed by winter storms. In the 5 years since he'd connected her with Sarah, Lucia had proven his instinct correct. Her observations about cell cultures had led to significant advancements in bioregeneration technologies. She was now completing her PhD at MIT while heading a research division at Northridge, her pathway from maintenance staff to scientist even more direct than Sam's had been. The ceremony continued with its traditional elegance, but Sam found his thoughts drifting to the moment of realization that had occurred 6 months earlier. A moment more meaningful to him than even this prestigious recognition. It had been a rather ordinary Tuesday. Sam had been working late in his laboratory at Northridge, now considerably larger than the corner workstation he'd started with. As the Institute's youngest ever department head, he oversaw the Alternative Pathways Division, a team dedicated to exploring unconventional approaches to long-standing scientific problems. The division had been his proposal, championed by Dr. Blackwell before his retirement, and enthusiastically continued by Sarah Collins when she assumed the directorship. Its staff was deliberately diverse, not just in conventional terms of background and identity, but in educational pathways and life experience. Former service workers studied alongside traditional academics. Night security guards with engineering hobbies collaborated with postdoctoral researchers. The only requirement was demonstrated ability to identify patterns and solve problems, regardless of credentials. That evening, Sam had been reviewing applications for the division's apprenticeship program when a knock at his door interrupted his concentration. He looked up to see an unfamiliar figure, an elderly gentleman with thinning white hair and alert eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Samuel Reeves?" the man asked, his voice carrying the slight quaver of advanced age. "Yes," Sam replied, standing to greet his visitor. "Can I help you?" The man smiled, extending a hand. "James Whitford. I used to work here long ago." Sam shook his hand, noting the firm grip that belied the man's apparent years. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Whitford. Are you here for the alumni reception?" No, Whitford chuckled. "I wasn't that kind of employee. I maintained the mechanical systems here from 1969 to 1983. Heating, cooling, electrical. Kept the place running while the smart folks did their thinking." Sam's interest immediately sharpened. Please have a seat. What brings you back to Northridge after all this time? Whitford lowered himself carefully into the chair across from Sam's desk. My granddaughter showed me an article about you in Scientific American. The janitor who solved the impossible molecule. Had to come see for myself. I hope the article didn't oversimplify too much, Sam said with a self-deprecating smile. There was a whole team of brilliant scientists working on that problem. Oh, I'm sure, Whitford nodded. But it was your note that broke the logjam, wasn't it? The fresh perspective that changed the approach? That's fair to say. Whitford leaned forward slightly. That's why I'm here. Your story reminded me of something I've kept to myself for over 40 years. From the pocket of his cardigan, the elderly man withdrew a yellowed envelope, carefully unfolding it on Sam's desk. Inside was a faded blueprint with handwritten annotations in the margins. Sam immediately recognized the architectural drawings for Building A, the original Northridge facility. December 1973, Whitford explained. Dr. Harrington had just published his theoretical paper about the molecule. Everyone was excited, talking about how it would revolutionize energy storage if they could synthesize it. But the initial attempts were failing. Sam studied the blueprint, noticing the annotations focused on the ventilation system. What am I looking at, Mr. Whitford? One night, I was checking the air handlers in the main chemistry lab. Dr. Harrington was working late, muttering to himself about molecular stability. I wasn't supposed to interrupt, but I noticed something on his workbench. Whitford tapped the blueprint. The ventilation was creating subtle temperature variations across the lab, here and here. The synthesis chambers closest to the vents were failing at higher rates. Sam's eyes widened as he understood. The temperature gradient was affecting molecular formation. Exactly, Whitford nodded. I left a note for Dr. Harrington suggesting we redirect the airflow. Simple maintenance issue, or so I thought. Next morning he came looking for me, asking all sorts of questions about consistent temperature environments. Did he credit your observation? Whitford shook his head. Wasn't important to me. I was just doing my job, pointing out something a scientist might not notice because it wasn't their area. But it changed their approach. They built the first environmentally controlled synthesis chamber based on that conversation. Sam sat back, processing this revelation. So even before my note about stabilization, there was another maintenance worker whose insight contributed to the Harrington project. History repeats itself, Whitford smiled. Only difference is they recognized your contribution, made you one of them. He gestured around the well-appointed laboratory. Back then, the line between maintenance and research was pretty fixed. We kept things running, they did the thinking. Why tell me this now? Sam asked, though he was beginning to understand. Because you've created something important here. Whitford gestured toward the windows overlooking the main research floor where Sam's diverse team worked. Your division, with people from all backgrounds, it's what science should have been all along. Not just the ones with the right degrees, but anyone who can see what others miss. Sam carefully refolded the blueprint. Mr. Whitford, would you be willing to share this story more formally for our archives? That's why I brought it, the older man confirmed. Figure it's time the full history was known. That evening marked the beginning of Sam's most personal project, one that would eventually become as important to him as his Nobel Prize-winning research. Over the following months, he began documenting what he called the hidden contributors, maintenance workers, administrative staff, and service personnel whose unrecognized observations had quietly advanced scientific progress throughout Northridge's history. James Whitford's story was just the first. There was Maria Delgado, a cafeteria worker in the 1990s who had noticed that certain food dyes degraded differently under the new energy-efficient lighting, leading researchers to investigate light sensitivity in molecular bonds. Then Curtis, Hammond, a groundskeeper whose observations about irrigation runoff patterns had influenced a hydrodynamics study. Dozens of stories emerged once Sam began actively seeking them. Small moments where those working in the background had seen patterns. The researchers missed. The Nobel ceremony concluded with a magnificent banquet, but even as Sam participated in the celebrations, his mind kept returning to the project that had become his passion. The medal was a validation of his scientific contribution, yes, but he increasingly understood that his more significant legacy might be in transforming how science recognized and incorporated diverse perspectives. 2 days after returning from Stockholm, Sam found himself in Northridge's vast archival storage facility, a climate-controlled basement rarely visited by anyone except the Institute's historians. He had obtained special permission to access the original laboratory notebooks from the Harrington era, searching for any documentation of James Whitford's contribution. The archivist, a meticulous woman named Eleanor, had guided him through the cataloging system before leaving him alone, among the shelves of bound notebooks and document boxes. The quiet was absolute, broken only by the faint hum of dehumidifiers, maintaining the precise conditions needed to preserve paper records. Sam ran his finger along the spines of leather-bound notebooks until he found the one he sought. Harrington. Project: Initial Synthesis Attempts, 1973-1974. He carefully removed it and carried it to the reading table, where gentle lighting would cause minimal damage to the aging paper. The notebook contained Thomas Harrington's precise handwriting, detailing each failed attempt to synthesize the molecule that would eventually bear his name. Page after page documented adjustments to chemical compositions, catalyst variations, and reaction conditions, all leading to the same result: instability and molecular collapse. Then on December 17, 1973, a shift occurred. The entry began, following conversation with Whitford, maintenance, regarding ventilation effects on temperature consistency, implementing controlled environment chamber for next attempt. Sam felt a surge of satisfaction at this confirmation. Whitford's contribution had been noted, if not publicly acknowledged. He carefully photographed the page for his records, then continued turning pages, following the progression of Harrington's work. Several entries later, he found something unexpected. A small diagram tucked between pages, drawn on what appeared to be the back of a maintenance request form. The sketch showed a simple visualization of molecular bonds with a note in different handwriting. What if structure builds from center outward? JW. Sam stared at the diagram, his heart racing. The approach outlined in this casual sketch was remarkably similar to the one he had proposed in his own note decades later. Whitford hadn't just suggested environmental controls, he had intuited something about the fundamental approach to the molecule structure, an insight that had apparently been noted but not fully explored. Sam carefully photographed this document as well, his mind reeling with implications. The insight that had ultimately led to the breakthrough had been glimpsed by another maintenance worker 40 years earlier, only to be filed away and forgotten, until Sam independently arrived at a similar conclusion. As he continued through the notebook, the entries showed that Harrington had briefly experimented with a different structural approach, following Whitford's suggestion, but had abandoned it after initial failures, returning to conventional methods. The inside-out stabilization pathway that eventually succeeded under Sam's proposal had been momentarily considered and discarded decades before. Sam closed the notebook gently, sitting back in his chair as a profound realization washed over him. Scientific progress wasn't a straight line, but a spiral, returning to previously abandoned paths with new tools, perspectives, and understanding. The impossible molecule might have been solved decades earlier if Whitford's structural insight had been more fully explored. if the rigid hierarchy between maintenance staff and researchers had been more permeable. His phone vibrated with an incoming message. Lucia had finally landed and was on her way to the institute. Sam texted back that he would meet her in the main lobby, then carefully returned the notebook to its place on the shelf. As he rode the elevator up from the archives, Sam's mind continued processing what he had discovered. His breakthrough hadn't been entirely original. It had been a rediscovery, an echo of an insight that had briefly surfaced decades earlier through another observer who worked in the background of the scientific enterprise. The real breakthrough wasn't just the molecular configuration. It was the willingness of Sarah Collins and Thomas Blackwell to listen when that insight resurfaced. The elevator doors opened to reveal the Institute's main lobby, now featuring a prominent display about the Nobel Prize recognition. Beside it stood the original exhibit showing Sam's note, the janitor's observation that had solved the 50-year mystery. Visitors were gathered around it, reading the story with expressions of wonder and inspiration. Across the lobby, Sam spotted Lucia entering through the main doors, still carrying her travel bag, her Nobel ceremony dress draped over her arm in a garment bag. He waved, and as she approached, he could see the same mixture of exhaustion and excitement on her face that he felt himself. "Congratulations, Dr. Reeves," she said with a grin, giving him a quick hug. "Sorry I missed your big moment." "You didn't miss anything important," Sam replied, taking her bag. "And it's our moment, not just mine, the whole team's." As they walked through the lobby, Lucia paused before the display of Sam's original note. "Where it all started," she mused. One scribbled observation from the night janitor. Sam thought about the documents he had just discovered in the archives. "Actually, I need to show you something. The story might be more complicated and more interesting than we thought." He led her toward his office, where the photographs of Whitford's forgotten contributions waited on his tablet. As they walked, they passed a maintenance worker, adjusting a light fixture, concentration evident on her face as she carefully aligned the replacement bulb. Sam paused, considering the woman thoughtfully. "Excuse me," he said. The maintenance worker looked up, surprised to be addressed by someone wearing a Nobel Prize pin. "When you finish with that, would you mind stopping by my office? There's something I'd like to discuss with you." "With me?" she asked, clearly confused. "Yes," Sam smiled. "I'm starting to believe that the most important scientific insights might be hiding in plain sight, noticed by the people we haven't been listening to." As they continued down the corridor, Lucia gave him a curious look. "What was that about?" "A realization," Sam replied. "The greatest scientific breakthrough wasn't solving the Harrington molecule. It was breaking down the walls between who we consider contributors to science and who we don't." He gestured to the busy laboratories they passed. "What if the solutions to our biggest challenges aren't waiting to be discovered, but waiting to be heard?" In that moment, as Nobel laureate Sam Reeves walked through the corridors of the institution where he had once pushed a mop, he understood his true purpose. The medal was not the culmination of his journey, but merely a tool, a platform from which to ensure that no insight would be overlooked because of who observed it, that no voice would go unheard because it spoke from behind a cleaning cart or a maintenance ladder. The real scientific revolution wasn't just about molecules and energy storage. It was about recognizing that breakthroughs could come from anywhere and creating a world where they would be heard, regardless of their source. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.